a good representation here. So thank you. If I got too late to make the newsletter, I had written it, but just hadn't sent it. I had it all up and thought I'd sent it and saw it didn't occur about what the program was today, but it seems like word has gotten out. But even if it hasn't, today is uh, May is Mental Health Month, and Jane Ann Leaves, our sister, friend, co-covenanter, is a MD and also a psychiatrist, and knows a lot about the aspect of mental health, and so she's volunteered to talk about it today. So Jane Ann, we're grateful for your offer, and look forward to what you have to say.
Well, thank you. I've always wanted to do something for Mental Health Month, and I did pamphlets about 10 years ago, and I thought, well, I want to do something else this time. So, so basically, what I have been doing is writing chapters for a memoir about living with bipolar disorder. And I realized I realized that just was too much of a burden to me. And I thought, I'm going to do something that I can do now that could be impactful in a positive way, and not wait to like write a book when I retire. So what I decided to do was read some of the chapters that I've written that are about the various manic episodes I had, and share this information to reduce the stigma of having bipolar disorder. A lot of people will say, you hear people saying sometimes, oh, I have ADHD or I have depression. You don't frequently encounter someone that says, I have bipolar disorder, because it's still something that's seen, I think, by a lot of people as being out there, as being foreign, maybe something to be suspicious of, they're scared of. Maybe they had a family member or a friend of the family, and they just don't harbor good thoughts and wishes and understanding for people that struggle with a really difficult disease to live with. So I'm pretty nervous. So I'm gonna read the chapters, but I'm just gonna go through and just tell y'all, just kind of summarize some of the things that have happened to me. So my first manic episode is usually preceded by multiple depressive episodes. I had 3 episodes of depression. The first one, I was 14 in the 8th grade. The second one, I was 21 in my 3rd year of college. And the last one was at 23 in my freshman year of medical school. My first manic episode did not come until I was 31. Some years ago, a fellow resident who I had trained with told me that everyone knew I had bipolar disorder because staying up all night on call didn't faze me. Statistics show that in the United States, 50% of people will have a mental illness at some point in their lives. 25% of people will have depression at some point, and 2.5% will have bipolar disorder type 1, which is what I have. Usually bipolar disorder is a lifetime disorder, But some people just have one manic episode, like 7% of people only have one episode. If you have the illness, usually on average, you'll have 9 episodes during your life. But numbers can go up to about 30. It takes about 3 or 4 months to recover from a episode. It's and there's a place, there's a point where you can go back to work, and you wouldn't be out of work for 3 or 4 months, but you might be taking it easy because it can be very hard to concentrate. I'm very fortunate in that I have enough money to buy health insurance. I've seen the same psychiatrist for the last 27 years and seen him every 1 to 3 months for 20 to 25 minutes. If I had no insurance and had to go to the Harris Center, which used to be called MHMRA, I'd be seen for 15 minutes every 3 months. There's no way I could get the quality of care there that I get seeing someone in private practice. There are some benefits of having bipolar disorder. You can get less sleep and be more resilient, but you can tip the balance and then get yourself into a hypomanic or manic episode. So it's something we really advise people not to do. I wish I could describe in minute detail the feeling of being connected to others and everything when I'm manic. And it's an intoxicating kind of experience. Like similar to how I feel during our worship services, where I feel in awe of the beauty of the words and the music and the surroundings and everybody's words and the readings. And I just find myself like looking around the church, just being so thankful for everybody that's there and feeling connected. And when I'm out of touch with reality, I am really aware of everything seeming connected. And when that goes away, when I, get better, it always makes me sad. I've had to be transported by an ambulance twice. And in the ambulance, I have had this delusion that I was going to be taken to a place where all the good people were meeting in a secret place, planning to change the world and bring peace upon it. Most of my symptoms are positive things like that, are like I'm an angel, or I'm the smartest person in the world and I'm going to write a movie script and it's going to come out right before the 2020 election. And because of my movie, Donald Trump will be beaten. I mean, there's some good things there. Some people tend to get paranoid when they get manic. I have gotten paranoid. It's usually fleeting. More I get grandiose. And I seem to be focused on how smart I am. Y'all hear this, and that it surprises me that comes up in my symptoms. So going to the secret place, it feels a little bit like, have any of y'all watched The Hunger Games? Yeah, you know the scene where Katniss gets lifted up into the aircraft and she gets up there and you get to see all the people in there and then you know who the good guys are. And it's that kind of thing where I think, okay, they're going to take me somewhere and there's going to be all these people that are planning. So let me just go over with you the official description of bipolar disorder. And this will just take a couple of minutes. And this will be helpful because as I read these 2 episodes, you're going to be able to see these things. In the first one, it unfolds and it's, it's out there, but it's not that out there. But you'll see these things. An elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, inflated self-esteem or grandiosity, decreased need for sleep. For example, feels rested after only 3 hours of sleep. More talkative than usual or pressure to keep talking. Flight of ideas or subjective experience that thoughts are racing. Some people say their thoughts race so fast they can't keep up with them. And sometimes you'll see somebody who's floridly manic, but they're just sitting still and they're not saying anything because for them, it's just going by so fast. They can't catch it. There's nothing to say. I guess it's just kind of like, I don't know, you don't hear your thoughts usually, but they're just racing. Another thing that you can see is flight of ideas, where a person is just talking really fast about various things, but it makes sense. There's also an increase in goal-directed activity. So basically, like starting a project, you're going to finish it, you get really intense with it, you get really involved, maybe you forget to eat lunch, maybe you forget to go pick your kids up at school because you're so into that activity. And then there's excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences, like unrestrained buying, buying sprees, sexual indiscretions, foolish business investments. So that's bipolar 1. Bipolar 2 has what we call hypomania, which is low-level mania. So if you get psychotic or you need to be hospitalized to keep you safe and others safe, it's called bipolar 1. But it's bipolar 2 if your functioning is not that disturbed. Like you can engage in your day with relative ease. Some people with bipolar disorder love to be in that state. I've never wanted to flirt with that because if I get sick and have to go in the hospital, the hospital is a terrible place to be. But some people like to play with it. Now, there's also cyclothymia, which is like low-level mania and low-level depression. And then there's dysthymia, which is just low-level depression. So those are the 5 mood disorders that are listed in the DSM-5. I'm sure everybody has a copy of this at home, right? Who has a copy of this? Anyone? Bev does. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna read. I've written some. I picked out I've had 4 episodes. The first one I'm gonna read. The second one, the most loving person in my entire life suddenly died. The next one, I had a visit with my parents. And then the last one was in February of 2018. I had not had one in 20 years. My doctor and I had slowly decreased my medicine, and I did something I'd never done. I changed the medicine myself, and I lowered it, and within 10 days I got manic. But it only lasted about 2 days. Okay. So here's episode number 1. But let me ask you guys, does anybody have any questions at this point? Sally? Oh, unmute yourself, Sally.
It seems like a couple of times you referred to not wanting to play with something. And most recently you said you didn't want to play with entering into a phase or a state of.
Uh-huh. Oh, I meant when I say I don't want to play with that, I don't want to take the chance of it. I don't want to take the risk of it.
I understand that, but it's hard for me to understand being in having a mental condition and having control, that kind of control. But you do? You have choice?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have choice about things like getting my sleep, not using much alcohol, keeping my stress level down as low as possible. But some people, they'll go off their meds because they like the way they feel when they're off their meds. And when I say I don't want to play with that, like, I can't imagine not taking my medication, because when I've gotten sick, when I've gotten manic, and also with just the horrible depressions I've had in the past, I don't want that to happen. It's I guess you could say it's a little bit like not taking your insulin, being kind of sloppy about it. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, so this one is entitled The First Time I Got Crazy. In late November of 1992, I attended a weekend seminar in Chicago to help me prepare for the general psychiatric oral boards coming up in 1993. The weather was cold, but it was not freezing on Friday, the day I arrived. 10 days before I left for Chicago, I'd sat in my first psychiatrist's office, believing I needed to be back on dizipramine, which was an old tricyclic antidepressant. I was shocked that he didn't agree with me. He thought I was just living the life of a new psychiatrist. I had finished my training that June and began my first job working for the county seeing indigent children. In that job, the only kids that were accepted at the clinic either had to be suicidal or homicidal or just discharged from a hospital or just discharged from a juvenile detention center. So it was a really high stress job. I mean, basically everybody you saw was in crisis or just left a crisis or coming back into one. It was extremely stressful. So I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping well. I was having a lot of trouble concentrating. I felt anxious. I felt sad. I worried that I wasn't enough. I left his office believing that more was going on than he thought was going on. And I left the office without a prescription, and I was really disappointed. When I got to Chicago for the board prep course, I checked into my hotel in the afternoon. My friend Roddy, who did her training at Baylor, arrived that evening. Roddy and I had met the year before working out with a husband and wife team of trainers. We were both lean at 115 pounds, but we wanted to be smaller and stronger. She and I attended the opening meeting and reception, where I had a very lively and interesting discussion with one of the faculty members. That night, I could not fall asleep. I was so worried that I would fall short. I laid in bed going over in my head how I'd conduct the interview. I had interviewed probably, I don't know, 500-600 patients, 1,000 patients in my training. But I was just so nervous because for me, this was, well, I think for everybody, you know, it's kind of a testament to what you've learned, what you're capable of. Since I was a kid, I always had trouble with self-esteem. But so anyway, so I was afraid I was going to fall flat on my face. And I realized that I had to focus my thoughts, put them on paper. I needed to do that, but I didn't want to wake Roddy up. So finally, at about 2, I went into the bathroom with a pillow, laid curled up on the cold floor, and wrote down the standard questions, but I kept revising them. I didn't know what scared me the most, interviewing the patient, presenting to the faculty member, or discussing the case. My thoughts kept racing. After 2 or 3 hours, I fell asleep on the bathroom floor. I had only slept 1 to 2 hours when Roddy's alarm clock went off. In one of the blocks, another participant interviewed a 40-year-old woman who everyone else thought had major depression. I thought she had what's called a delusional disorder. Delusions are basically false beliefs that are not backed up by reality. The woman said that, I mean, she wasn't sad. She was enjoying her life. She was sleeping okay. Her energy was good. Her motivation was good. She said one sentence about some foul odor coming out of one of her air conditioning vents. And she also said that when she looked out of her window, she could see a line across the city dividing good and evil. There was something in the words she used to describe that line that was bizarre. When I commented during the discussion about the line she saw, many of the participants told me I must not know much about Chicago. They described that there really were 2 halves of the city in which the haves and have-nots lived separately. That evening, we had another gathering, and I discussed the day with the same faculty member I talked with the night before. I told him about my experience being in a group in which everyone thought the patient was depressed, but that I thought had a delusional disorder. By coincidence, he was her doctor and I was right. It felt good to hear those words. I relaxed and got more sleep on our second night there. The next day, I felt pretty confident about interviewing a patient, and I did a good job. When the day was over, and it was a Sunday, Roddy and I headed to the airport. While waiting at a bar, I struck up a conversation with a woman who I recognized from the meeting. She had trained in Iowa, where my dad did his internship. He's a family practitioner. She said the training was good, but that she found Iowans to be very pragmatic and lacking in emotional intelligence and psychological curiosity. That was true of my dad. He knew very little about mental health problems. As Roddy and I walked to our gate, I reflected on the weekend and developed a growing sense that I was more intelligent than most people. I believed that others in the airport were catching on to this reality and were in awe of me. How did they know I was exceptionally intelligent? Because of the way my coat swung as I walked along and by my exuberance. I thought it rather unusual that I would think this way. I was almost always critical of myself and frequently judged myself through a very dark lens. Confidence is one thing. Thinking that everyone in the airport knew how smart I was due to the way I walked and the movement of my long coat was literally crazy, but I still believed it might be true. Driving home from the airport, I remained on top of the world, but my mood dropped after talking to my next door neighbor, Mark. Our conversation went from greeting, he's also a psychiatrist. Our conversation went from greetings to the board prep meeting, to our work, and then to our broken marriages. I had moved into the complex when I left my husband, and he had done the same in leaving his wife. I shared with Mark what a jerk my ex-husband was. Mark had done a rotation with him, and he knew him, and he agreed. So after Mark left, I felt really bad. I'd gone from feeling really up to feeling really down. Talking about Mike always brought me down. When I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth and wash my face, I noticed I could hear the air coming out of the air conditioning vent, but there was something different about it. I stepped back from the vent, trying to figure out what was happening. I turned off the faucet, dried my face. The sound was still there. It sounded like someone was breathing in and out. I thought, that can't be. I walked into the hallway. I couldn't hear air flowing at all from the hallway vent. I went back to the bathroom, and there it was again. The breathing in and out made no sense at all. But at that point, I began to think that the sound was not just any someone, it had to be the devil. To myself, I said, Jane Ann, come on, you're getting really crazy now. Knock it off. First, you thought you were superhuman, and now you think the only distance between you and the devil is a wall with an air vent. You don't even believe in the devil. I wanted to call another psychiatrist friend, but it was too late. I needed help fast. I was going in and out of being psychotic, of being out of touch with reality. The swishing coat and the breathing devil were way outside the norm. Part of me thought I should get Mark and tell him what was going on, but I decided not to because I would be too embarrassed. I did not want to go back to see my same old psychiatrist. He'd written off my depression. Having just finished my training, I knew a lot of psychiatrists and I knew their work. I knew who I could trust to take care of me. I called him as soon as his office opened the next morning. He'd been my first supervising psychiatrist when I was an intern and again when I was a fellow. I told him what was going on. He told me he could see me the next morning. I told him I was afraid that if I didn't see him that day, I was going to wind up in the hospital. He cleared a space for me for that afternoon. He believed that I was having a manic break. He wanted me to take lithium and a different antidepressant. I was afraid to take them without doing an EKG because both could affect my heart. He asked me if I trusted him, and I did, so I said okay. I called my girlfriend Belgian and told her what was happening, and she invited me to stay with her and her husband for the week. It was Thanksgiving week. So I packed up, went to her house. That night I took the first dose ever of lithium, and I slept like a baby. I woke up clear-headed and refreshed and wanted to get up and start my day. That hadn't happened in months, if not years. They were really there for me. I was glad to have friends I could be honest with and who would take good care of me. So that was the first time. And it's It's I mean, I know hearing a devil breathe is like, not normal. But I didn't do anything like that put me in harm's way, like I did in the second one. Okay. So the first one was in 92, and then I had another episode in 96. I was hospitalized for 10 days. They were giving me medications, and Herman and Memorial had just combined, and somehow, I think they must have been a part of Spring Shadows Glen too, but they had their tablets in different little, packets where you pressed it out. And I would only take the ones that had hearts on them because I was an angel. And so I hadn't slept for about 4 days before I went into the hospital then. And I didn't sleep for another 4 days. But I did really well when I got out of the hospital. So this episode is in October of 97. It's called The Miraculous. In my small, modest apartment at the corner of Greenbrier and Alabama in the Montrose meets Upper Kirby district in Houston, Texas, in October of 1997, at the age of 36, I laid face down in the closet of my bedroom, asleep, holding my home phone in one hand and my cell phone in the other. My winning lottery ticket was in my jeans pocket. I waited on President Clinton's call. Many miracles were performed that night. That I actually fell asleep was one of them. No doubt about that. I was awakened by the door opening and looked up to see 2 policemen standing above me. Now, I have to tell you guys, some of this stuff is funny. And if you want to laugh, that's fine. But just make sure that you unmute yourself so I can hear it. I wish I could see it if y'all laugh, because there are some funny things in here. Okay, so one of the policemen said, "Are you Miss Leaves?" And I responded, "Yes." He turned and they stood facing away from me, between me and my bed, their hands on their hips in their pressed medium blue shirts and black pants. They were wearing belts with their various accoutrements. I always wondered what would happen if I snuck up behind a cop and pulled a gun out of its holster. It took all the brakes in my prefrontal cortex to not try and grab their guns. I felt so clever and proud of myself for not bowing to temptation. The windows were open. Cold air poured in through them. There was a small round pool that was below me. I was on the second floor, and the continuous sound of the water flowing was always really peaceful. I could hear it around the clock. It was wonderful. And it sounded peaceful to me that morning, even though I was in the situation of having 2 policemen in my bedroom. The policeman asked me to get up, and I did. They walked me down the short hallway past the dining area, walking past the dining table, seeing the shrine I had built in honor of Princess Diana stirred the memories of the night before. They walked me out the door, down the stairs to the parking lot, where I was put into an ambulance with a medic who was one of the most handsome men I had ever seen. He had black wavy hair. Again, the brakes worked. I wanted to kiss him, but no, not a peep of this to him. I did flirt with him, however, in a light and friendly way, like I was the proverbial girl next door. He checked my blood pressure and pulse as we drove through the complex and out the exit gate. All my energy went into conversation with him. I knew not where we were going. I figured we would go to the medical center, but alas, we went south on Highway 59 to 12 Oaks Hospital. Once inside the ER, I was asked to move over to a gurney. I hid under the sheet in perpetual motion for what seemed like hours. My best friend Marty mysteriously appeared. She said into her cell phone, "I'm down here with a friend." I told her, "Be quiet. George Clooney's going to be coming around here any minute." Then I heard Marty talk to someone I could not see who stood beyond the divider curtain. "She's a doctor. She's really smart. Such a pity." The next part is a little sketchy. They must have given me a sedative because this part I can't fully recall. One of the things about when you get manic, if you don't have a sedative on board, like Xanax or Valium, something that's sedating, you remember everything that happened. And when somebody's acutely manic, you want to shut that down as fast as you can because people do things that are embarrassing. They do things that are dangerous. And so you want to shut it down. And so going back, the next part is a little sketchy. They must have given me a sedative because this part I can't fully recall. I found myself sitting at a table in some kind of interrogation room. I knew the name of the doctor in front of me. I had learned it via long hours in the Herman ER several years before during my training to be a psychiatrist. I said to him, "You have a lot of patience," insinuating that there was something sinister about that. It never occurred to me that maybe he had lots of patience because he was a good doctor. Then he ordered and I received an injection of the magic elixir, which would cast me out of the spell 24 hours later. 2 days before, my parents had traveled by car from our hometown of Naples, Texas, in Northeast Texas. Populated by less than 2,000 people, it had been dying since the interstate highway bypassed it by 30 miles. Mom and Dad usually came to see me once or twice per year. We had a warm and easy visit that late October weekend, out for meals and some shopping. I was so excited to see them that I did not sleep on Friday night. Something came up and they had to leave on Saturday morning. It was hard to say goodbye to them. Time was slow and fast that afternoon. I was sleepy but couldn't fall asleep for a nap. I had scheduled a phone call with my therapist for that afternoon, but I forgot to call her. She called me and we rescheduled for later in the day, but I forgot to call her then too. Another strange thing about that day is that the temperature dropped precipitously by 30 to 40 degrees in a matter of hours. Because of this, I layered my favorite t-shirt, a red heavy cotton long sleeved t-shirt, over my white tank top. I was meeting a friend for a movie that night. I had to squeeze in time to buy a lottery ticket before the movie. Never into playing the lottery, for some reason it had special significance to me that night. In selecting my numbers, I felt a heady sense of conviction that I would win. To increase my chances, I decided that I needed to pay for my ticket in a unique way. I spilled out all my coins into my living room floor in a pile. Was it to be 100 pennies or 20 nickels or 10 dimes or 4 quarters? The dimes went out. I put them in my blue jeans pocket. When I left, I forgot to take my purse and my cell phone. I never thought about them. I bought the lottery ticket at a corner Chevron station, then drove on to the River Oaks Theater. When I got there, I left my car running with the door open in the middle of the parking lot and went to see if my friend had arrived. Not seeing her, I went back to the car. I parked and went back to the box office. I spotted my friend in line and told her I had forgotten my money, so she paid for my ticket. We chose our seats in the middle of the theater. I could not pay attention to the movie and didn't understand what was going on, so I excused myself and went to the bathroom. So many ideas raced through my head that seemed like really good ones that I asked the bartender for paper to write on. He gave me a roll of paper towels. I wanted to remember these thoughts. I produced 15 pages and carefully numbered them. I must have written for at least an hour. When I re-entered the theater, the movie was over and my friends had left. I still missed my parents and wanted to be with them badly. I drove north in the direction of Intercontinental Airport, but it soon dawned on me that there'd be no flights at that time of night. It was then, with much brilliance, that I decided on another mode of transportation. If I drove fast enough, me and my car, a black Acura Integra, would turn into a bird and I could fly home. As I raced ahead on Highway 59, I carefully thought through what would make it easier to turn into a bird. Birds have no lights, so I dimmed the instrument panel and turned off the headlights. I folded the outside mirrors inward and flipped up the rearview mirror so I could not see behind me. This too done for my car to be more like a bird. Then finally, as I traveled almost to Beltway 8, I decided I would prove my loyalty to God, whose existence I doubted on a quite regular basis, by flooring the gas pedal and closing my eyes at the same time. Once I floored it and closed my eyes, the car immediately began to shut down. I was shocked. I could barely get it to go forward. I had thought my plan would work. All I could say to myself was that the transformation process was breaking down. Somehow I managed to drive the car to the shoulder of the road. As other cars drove swiftly by, I walked around the car trying to figure out what went wrong. I still had to figure out how to get to my parents. In the distance, I saw a futuristic transit station. Being a world-class athlete, but unranked, I ran toward it. Knowing my clothes would increase my wind resistance, I began to peel off my layers. First my red t-shirt, then my white tank top, then my underwear. Within 2 to 3 minutes, I got to the transit center, but no one was there. There were phones, but I had no money or credit cards. Then I saw a police car a few blocks away. I knew my mother would be disappointed in me if I was arrested partially nude, so I ran back the way I had come, putting each article of clothing back on. Back at the car, there was a very tall, heavy-set man standing between his truck and my car. He could only grunt, but somehow we communicated and he offered to drive me back home. He showed me that both of my front tires on my car had blowouts. I got in his truck and in no time we were headed south on 59. As we approached downtown Houston, I was struck by how cold it was and wondered if it might snow. How beautiful it would be to see snow falling in front of the headlights as we journeyed onwards. Once we arrived at my apartment, I realized he was deaf. We tried to communicate on paper. I indicated that I had to go and thanked him for bringing me home. While talking on the phone to the fireman I was seeing, who lived across the way, I walked downstairs to the pool and once there took off all my clothes. When my fireman friend opened his door, he looked panicked and pulled me inside. He did not seem happy to see me. He wrapped me in a bath towel. 1 minute later, he freaked out when he opened the door to find the deaf man standing there looking after me. The fireman told him to leave. I protested, but it was to no avail. The rest of the night was a blur. The fireman chased off the deaf man. He walked me home, tucked me into bed, and left, leaving the door unlocked. I tried to stay connected to him by going out to his truck a little later and decorating it with empty plastic water bottles. As I ran back and forth from his truck and my apartment, a distance of about 50 yards, bending down and picking things up, I could hear my heart beating in my ears. If I moved my body in just the right way, I could make the swish swish sound go away. I then spent a long time making a huge 2 feet tall shrine to Princess Diana on my dining room table. I covered the whitewashed round oak table carefully with a cream throw with embroidered taupe angels on it. Then I put my other angel throw, which has dark blue with 2 huge white angels atop stacks of books of varying heights. The next layer was made up of staggered candles, angels, flowers, and books about her. The book jackets had beautiful pictures of her on them. She had been killed that August. Looking at what I'd made me cry, but it gave me such joy too. By then, it was 6 a.m., and I felt as happy as I ever had in my whole life. To celebrate, I turned my very expensive stereo all the way up and ran to my closet with both phones in my hand to await President Clinton's call. I knew he would soon know that I had won the lottery and that I was the smartest person in the whole world. Finally, then I could get some sleep. And you know what? I think I forgot to mention that the purpose of the book is to work. Did I say that? To work to reduce stigma about bipolar disorder. Did I say that in the very beginning? Okay, most people are saying yeah. Okay. So there's one other thing that I just want to read from this. Excuse me, my mouth is dry. I want to read this passage. This book just came out. We're all affected, all of us, and a balance will tip, and everyone in the room, everyone in the community, and indeed everyone in the country is going to realize that mental illness is no longer about these people. It is not those people. Oh my, I've gone way, I'm going too far. I'm stopping. All I want to add is that I hope I don't get manic again, but if I do, I'm going to put it in the newsletter. And I hope that this helps people to feel like they could put in the newsletter something like, I'm very depressed, or, you know, it's, you know, we make ourselves more vulnerable when we report that we have a mental illness. But there's so many people who suffer in silence. And the incidence of bipolar disorder is such that our church probably has like 2.5 people that also have bipolar disorder. So I think I want to get y'all's thoughts.
I think Bethany's bipolar disorder was probably the type 2. She never had really high manic episodes. And as far as I know, she only had one depressive episode where she was potentially suicidal. That happened when she was in college, and her college friends took her to the emergency room, and that's when she first got some medication that helped.
Yeah.
Mine is very definitely bipolar 2. I've never had a strong manic episode. Mine, the ones that I've had were always just, I felt jittery and almost like I was vibrating, and I got a lot done, and I was very motivated, but then when I would rotate off of it, I would just basically collapse for a couple of days unable to even function. But in my family, bipolar 2 has cut an enormous swath over several generations. Bipolar 1, I mean, has cut a huge swath across several generations.
Yeah, I don't have anybody in my family that has it. I think I was abused when I was a kid, and trauma increases your risk of developing bipolar disorder. It affects your cortisol levels, and it actually leads to atrophy of your brain. So cell death if you're under that kind of stress for, a long time.
Well, I think we are, I'm sure there are other people over time with their other questions, but Jane Ann, you've done us a favor today. You've brought us a blessing by helping us learn more about yourself and about bipolar disorder. And we did get to know you better. And I think the result is going to be very good. It's
Thank
already,
you, Bill. Thank you. I'm glad to present on it. Really glad. Yeah,
I'm glad you volunteered.
thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.